Welcome to the Orca. I'm Rick Cluff. The BC Medical Services Plan Premium is now on its way out, but the NDP government has a replacement in mind called the Employer's Health Tax. So what will this mean for taxpayers? What does this mean for small businesses in particular? Our next guest says that big costs are coming. Kris Sims is the BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Kris joins us today via Skype. Kris, hello.
Hello, thanks for having me on.
For those who might not fully understand just what the government is thinking, what's going to happen with MSP premiums?
So the MSP is down at 50% now, but it's going to hang around come January, come the new year. So it's going to linger around for a full calendar year at 50% for the original MSP. But the catch here is that they're also hitting employers, those who are job creators in this province, with a brand new health tax called the Employer Health Tax, the EHT, at the same time. And so they're creating a double dip on mostly employers in this province and hitting them with these big healthcare taxes.
So how might that affect businesses then?
It's going to drastically affect many businesses. So keep in mind that a $500,000 threshold, that's when the EHT kicks in, the employer health tax, is really easy to get to for payroll. So say you're a really successful restaurant, or for example, I was just up in Prince George and there's this independent truck and auto parts contractor. They're a parts store. It's easy for them to get over $500,000 in payroll because of the skilled trades that they employ. And so they're really going to be hit with this employer health tax because they're also one of the very nice employers who is already paying the MSP for their employees. And so they're getting hit with this big double whammy, this big double dip of taxation that's being inflicted upon them from Victoria. And then there's also this element that a lot of people may not know is that municipalities, cities and towns are going to get hit with this too, because almost by default, a city or a town will have a payroll of more than $500,000. And guess what? They're not exempt. And so they're getting hit with this new EHT, and that money is going to have to come from somewhere, because as we know, municipal governments can't run deficits. That's a good thing. But the money does need to come from somewhere, and so people are really bracing themselves for property tax increases to pay for this new healthcare tax.
Companies and municipalities are now building their budgets for 2019, so how much might this cost them?
That's a great question. It all depends on who you ask. If you ask some of our friends at the CFIB, the Canadian Federation for Independent Businesses, it's going to be an awful lot of money. There are others who are doing calculations based on whether or not that original employer was paying the MSP and is now subject to the EHT and what that double whammy will look like. But so far, from what we can tell, it's just simply going to be a lot of money. And out of principle, on principle, there should not be a double dip on a healthcare tax. That's just fundamentally unfair on the face of it. And I think we'll really only start to understand exactly how much this is costing employers, whether they're municipal or companies, come January. Once those bills really start rolling in and they're able to project into the future and really do the math, that's when we'll really start to know the hard numbers.
But you know, Kris, there's only one pot of money. And the province is going to be asked by education for a bigger share, by transportation. Healthcare is expensive, so they have to generate the funds somehow. What's the alternative?
The alternative, we think, is for them to stop blowing our money, stop wasting so much money. If they were more careful, more frugal with how they actually spent the tax dollars they already take from us, they wouldn't have to continue to invent brand new taxes. And keep in mind that every single time we have an increased demand for something, whether it be healthcare or education, we simply can't continuously look at all taxpayers as a cash cow and keep jacking up the taxes. On average, Canadians pay more than 40% of their incomes right now to various levels of government in taxation. If we go along this pathway and keep hiking it up more and more and more, we're going to be at 60% before we know it. And so that's why we believe at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation that the answer is restraint. They need to really take a look at their budget, really analyze it, and ask themselves, is it really necessary to spend this money? And frankly, because we showed that the MSP was so bloated, the administrative costs for it were so expensive that it really wasn't worth it. So we're very confident that they should be able to find this money within their existing budgets.
Besides restraint and efficiency, which I think everybody would like to see, what else do you say to the government about this?
What else I say to the government about this is keep in mind that this is not just their money. It's their money in the sense that they're taxpayers as well, but it's their neighbors' money, it's their company's money, it's their employers' money, it's all of our money. And unless you would ask a stranger for this amount of money to pay for the fund that you want it for, you have to ask yourself if it's worthwhile. One of the former premiers of British Columbia, W.A.C. Bennett, we don't know yet if this has now become myth or a legend or if it was originally based on fact, but there's a very interesting story about him that said that he required his staff in the Premier's office to come to him personally and ask permission to make a long-distance phone call. Why? Because it costs money. And it sounds like it's small potatoes, but when you take care of those little elements, you start thinking better when it comes to spending, and you start asking yourself if that spending is really necessary. And it was really evident, for example, we had the pre-budget consultations that are touring around British Columbia right now, and we went to them up in Prince George. And at those consultations, it's basically the MLAs on the subcommittee for finance listening to a parade of people from different organizations come in and ask for funding. Some of them are well-meaning, but they're mostly all wanting money. And our job at the CTF is to show up and say, stop. Stop and think about what you're spending and ask yourself if it's really necessary.
Kris, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.